Look at this select element. It is a normal select in HTML. You open a drop down and select one of the options. In this video, I'm going to show you how to change this select element into this. You can select one of the options, and also you can search the options right here. Like if I enter B, all the options that starts with B will appear and the rest options will disappear. This is useful when you have a lot of options in the select, like 200 options, and you don't want the user to scroll down and look at each option, but rather he can search the options right here, like enter Japan, and he finds his option, click on it, and it will be selected as you can see. And then when he submits the form, this value will be submitted to the server. With that being said, let's get started. First, let's create an HTML file and I'll name it index.html. Close the Explorer. Here I will type an exclamation mark, press tab, and this code will be generated for you. The title will be searchable select element. Here I will put the style tag. You can set CSS and JavaScript in separate files, but for me I will put all of them in this file in order to make it simple for the video. So here I will write my style tag, and down below before the closing body tag I will put the script tag, scripts, and here is where the JavaScript goes. Now let's start by the HTML. First I need a div element and I will give it the class dropdown box. Inside this div, I will create another div element and I will give it the class selected item. Inside this div element, I will create an input text element because I want to put the selected item to be as a value of an input element, because when the user submit the form, this value is submitted to the server. So I will create an input text. The default value will be the text select and it's gonna be read only. Read only. This is the header of the drop down. Now I have to write the body, so I'll create a div element and I will give it the class drop down content. This drop down content will include a search input. So first I will create a div element with the class search input, and here I will create an input text input text, and this is the input that the user will type his search text. Right here I will create the drop down items. They're gonna be inside a UL, an ordered list, and inside this UL we will have a bunch of list items. I will give it the class drop down item, and here I will copy this list item for a bunch of times. The first element will contain the default value, which is this one, so I'll put it here, and it's gonna be active by default, so I will add a class active, and here I will type a bunch of countries, like I will enter Yemen, Saudi Arabia. After entering some countries here, I think we've done with HTML. So let's start with CSS. The first thing I will do is to select all the elements and set the box sizing to border box. Then the margin and padding will be 0, padding 0. And now let's open our project with live server. Right click and then open with live server. You can see that this is the result of our HTML. This is the first input element, which is read only, and this is the second input element that the user should enter his text in order to search this list items. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code, and first I will select the body element because I want to center the content in order to see it easily. So I will set the text align property into center, and you can see it is centered in the middle of the screen. I will put some padding from the top and bottom, so I'll say padding 50 pixels, here maybe 200 pixels. Great. Now let's start by styling this input element. I will select it, it is here, this input element. So I will take this master class, I'll put it here, drop down box, and then I will take this class selected item, copy it and put it here, and inside this selected item I need the input. Here I will change the border to 1 pixel, solid, and some gray color RGB, maybe like 200, 200, 200. Let's see the result. Or maybe let's make it darker so I can change the value from here. Maybe this is good. Let's save and see the result. Okay, this is better. I want to set the width of the master class, which is this one, drop down box. I'll copy it, paste it here, and then set the width to maybe like 300 pixels. You can see that it moved to the left. I will fix that by replacing this text align property with display flex and then justify content center. Let's see the result. You can see this looks better. Now let's set the width of this input element or both of these input elements into 100%. So instead of selecting just this input element, the first one, I want to select both of these inputs because they're gonna have the same style. I will say here width 100%. You can see that it looks better. If I zoom in, you can see this good. Now I want to remove this outline, so here I'll say that outline will be none. Now when I focus in one input, there is no outline. This is great. Now I want to have a border radius of 5 pixels, so I'll set border radius to 5 pixels and the padding will be from the top and bottom maybe 3 pixels, and from the right and left it's gonna be 10 pixels or maybe just 5 pixels. Save and see the result. You can see this is good. Now I want to create a down arrow here in this area to indicate that this is a drop down, because I want the user to click on this input and the drop down will be showing. So I will select the after pseudo element. Here I will take this selector, paste it there. I just want the first input element, not the second one. So I'll take this class again and paste it here. Now let's specify that I want the after pseudo element. This is after, open the block. The content will be empty string as usual. The width and height, I don't know, let's say for now 3 pixels. With 3 pixels, height also 3 pixels. The border will be maybe 2 pixels. The style will be solid, and I'm not gonna put the border color here because I want just specific sides of the box to have border. So I will say border color. I will take this color because I want to set it here. From the top, I want it to be transparent. From the right, it's gonna be this color. From the bottom, it's gonna be this color, and from the left, it's gonna be transparent. Now I want to set the position of this after pseudo class, so I will select this selected element. I'll copy it and paste it here, open the block, and say that I want it to be position relative. And sorry, here we don't need the input, we need the after class to be of the selected item. So I will remove this input, and now here I will say position absolute, and then I can set the top and right. So the top will be 50% because I want it to be in the middle. The right will be, I don't know, maybe 20 pixels, and I want to make some transform, so I will say transform, translate y, it's gonna be negative 50%. Let's save and see the result. You can see that we have this box. I want to rotate it to be like a down arrow, so I will specify here that I want a rotate of 45 degrees. Save and see the result. You can see that this is good, but I want to move it a little to the top, so I'll change this translate to maybe 70%. Save, see the result. You can see that it looks better, but also I want to move it to the right, so here I will set it to 10 pixels. You can see that it looks perfect. Now I want to change the cursor to a pointer for both of the div element and the input element, so I'll select both of them. I'll take this selector, paste it here, and I want the input element that is inside, so I will say input, and now I will set the cursor to pointer. Save and see the result. You can see that the cursor is pointer when I hover on this area. Now let's style the content that is here. So I will take the master class, which is drop down box, copy it from here and paste it here, and now I will select this class, which is drop down content, copy, paste, open the block. Let's start by putting some box shadow, so I'll say box shadow. Horizontally it's gonna be 0 pixels, vertically it's gonna be 5 pixels, the blurriness will be 15 pixels, and the shadow color will be RGB black with an opacity of 15%. Save and see the result. You can see that I have this box shadow. I will change the border radius to 5 pixels, so here I will say border radius 5 pixels. Great. Now I want to put some gap between the input and the side of this div element, so I will select this search input. I will select it, I'll copy it from here, paste it here. Oh, there's a missing S here. I'll type it, and I will copy this selector and paste it before the search input class. Open the block, and I will set the padding to 5 pixels. Save to see the result. You can see that I have this gap between the div element and the input. Now I want to remove these dots of UL, so I will take this selector, drop down content, I'll copy it and select the UL and say that I want the list style to be none. Go back to the browser to see the result. You can see that I don't have these dots anymore. Now let's change the font family of the text. I'll go back to the general selector that is at the top and say that I want the font family to be Arial, Helvetica, sans serif. This is good. Save, and you can see that this is better. The next thing is that I want to decrease the font size of these Lee elements. As you can see, they are a little big, so I'll go back to here and I will select the list items. I will say that I want the list items, so the font size will be maybe 0.9 rem. Let's see the result. You can see that this is a little better, or maybe I can set it to 0.8 rem. Save, see the result. You can see that this is good. Now I want to put some padding for this Lee element, so I will set the padding from the top and bottom. It's gonna be 2 pixels. From the right and left it will be like 5 pixels. See the result. You can see that this is good. Now let's set some hover when I hover on one of them, but before that I want to change the cursor to be pointer, so here I will say cursor pointer, and now let's implement the hover. So I will take this select, copy, paste here, hover state, and the background color will be something like 230, sorry, RGB. Inside RGB I'll write 230, 230, 230. Save to see the result. You can see that this is good. When I hover on one of them, the background color changes, as you can see, but I want to make it a little lighter, so set it to 45, 245. Let's see the result. I think this is better. Now let's change the style of this active. As you can see, I've set this lit element to be the active element, so I will style this active. I'll copy this class and here put the class active and copy this selector and I'll paste it here, and now I will say that the background color will be some blue color. Let's change it from here, so it's gonna be like a cyan color. I think this color is good. And for the text color, I will set it to be something like dark blue, so let's also set it from here. I'll change it to, I don't know, maybe this color. Save to see the result. You can see that's a little better. It's not perfect. You can change the color until you find it good, but for me I'm just picking some random color and random values just to make the videos. I'm not trying to make the colors and values perfect. So let's go back to the Visual Studio Code, and here I want to set the height of this drop down to be a specific height, and for the user to find the rest values I want him to scroll down, so I want to make this area scrollable. I'll go back to here and I want this selector, drop down box, and the drop down content. Here I will set the max height to be maybe like 350 pixels, and the overflow will be auto, so when the height is taller than this max height, a scroll bar will be shown. Save to see the result, and as you can see I have this scroll bar. I think I can reduce the max height to be maybe 300 pixels. Save to see the result, or maybe shorter, something like 250 pixels. As you can see, this looks good, but I don't want a list item or a drop down item to be cutted this way. So I'll click inspect, right click, inspect, go to here to the drop down content, and I will change the max height. I'll click here, hover on this list element, and from the keyboard you will press on the down arrow in order to reduce the max height, because I want to set it exactly to this value. So 240 pixels pixels are good, so I'll copy it, close inspect, and I'll paste it here. So the max height will be 240 pixels. This is great. Go back to the browser, refresh. You can see that this is great. Now I want to change the color of these two inputs, this text and also this text. I want to change it to some gray color. So I'll go to input, this one, and I will set the color to be RGB, something like 120, 120, 120. See the result. I think we should make it a little darker, so I'll set it to 80, 80, 80. Save to see the result. As you can see, this looks better. Now let's specify that this drop down content should be hidden by default. The way to do that is that I want this drop down content to be display none by default. It's gonna have display none, and when the master class, which is drop down box, has the active class, it's gonna be display block. So I'll change this to display block, and here I'll specify that I want this drop down box to be active. So I'll set the class active. Save to see the result. You can see that it's hidden, but when I put the active class to the drop down box, active, save, you can see that it's shown. We're gonna control that through JavaScript, but before moving into the JavaScript, there's a problem here. If I write some HTML content after this one, like let's say it's a p element, and write some text, lorem tab. If I save and go to the browser, you can see that they sit next to each other. Let's fix this problem first. I will go to the body element here. I'll say that I want the flex direction to be column, and this value will be align items, not justify content. So I'll say align items, center, save, and go back to the browser. This is the actual problem that I wanted to show you, which is that this drop down content takes space from the screen, but rather I wanted to overlap with the content. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. I'll go back to Visual Studio Code. You can see that when I remove this active class and save, this text moves to below the select, but when I put the active class and save, you can see that this text moves to below the drop down content, but I want it to be behind the drop down content. The way to implement that is I will go to Visual Studio Code, and in this master class, which is drop down box, I'll say that I want it to be position relative, and the drop down content, which is here, is gonna be position absolute. If I save and go back to the browser, you can see that overlaps with the content. Now I want to set the z index, so here I will say that the z index will be something like 99. Save, go back to the browser. Now I have to put some background color for this drop down content, so I'll say background color. I want it to be RGB white, so 255, 255, 255. Save to see the result. You can see that it looks better. Now I want the width to be 100%, so I'll say here width is 100%. Save, go back to the browser. You can see that it looks better. When the drop down is shown, it pop-ups in front of this text element or any content that is on the browser screen. So here, when I remove the active class, you can see that the content is good, and when I put the active class, drop down content pop-ups in front of the rest content. Now let's start working with JavaScript. I will remove this active class, and here in the script tag, I will add the load event to the window. So I'll say window.addEvent listener. The event name is load, and here is a callback function, parentheses, arrow, and then body. Great. The first thing I want to do in JavaScript is that I want to control the click. When the user clicks on this drop down, I want it to be opened, and when the user clicks again on this area or even any other area on the browser, I want the drop down to be hidden. So I'm gonna implement that this way. I will add a click event to the window, so I'll say window.addEvent listener. The event name is click, and here I need the click event parameter, so I'll name it window click event, arrow, and then the body of the callback function. And now I want to check if the click is inside the drop down content that will pop up or outside the drop down content. So I want to store that drop down content into a constant or a variable. So I'll copy this class drop down content and I'll create a constant here. So I'll say const, I'll name it drop down content equal sign, and then document dot query selector. I want to query the element that has this class drop down content. Now I will check if the click is inside this drop down content. The way to do that is to create an if statement and say, does drop down content contain that click? I'll use this function and I will say window click event, this parameter dot target. This is the attribute that contains the position of this click. So what I'm saying here is that I want to check if this drop down content area contains the position of that click. Open the body of the if statement. Actually, I want to check if this drop down content doesn't contain that click, because when it doesn't contain that click, I want the drop down to be closed. So I'll put the not sign here, the not operator, and here I will close the drop down. I'll put that inside a function. So I'll say close drop down. I'll name this function close drop down, and I will implement this function inside this load event. So I'll say function, the name of the function is close drop down. This is the body of the function. The way to close the drop down is to remove the active class from this div element. So I'll take this class and I will query it here. So I'll say const drop down and I will query that class. So I'll say document dot query selector. I want this class drop down box, and now I want to remove the active class from drop down box. So I'll say here drop down dot class list dot remove. I want you to remove the active class. Now I want to check if the click is inside this div element, because if it is inside this area, I want to open the drop down. The way to do that is I'll go to here and I want to check if the drop down is active. So first I want to store that master class, which is drop down box, into a constant here. So here I'll say const drop down document dot query selector. I want to query this class, and now I will take this constant and here I want to check if class list contains active. I will open the block of this if statement and I will move this if statement to here, and I will say else if it doesn't contain active. I will check if the click is inside this div element, inside this area. So first I want to store that area into a constant, which is here selected item. I'll copy this class and here I will say const selected item document dot query selector. I want this class, so I'll paste the constant here and I will say does it contain the window click event dot target. So what I'm saying now, if the click is inside this selected item, I want to open the drop down. The same thing with the close drop down. I will now put it inside a function. So I'll say open drop down and I will implement this function down below. Here I'll say function open drop down parentheses and then the block of this function, and here I'll copy this code. I'll copy it from here and paste it here, and I'll change this to be add because I want to add active when the drop down is open. Now let's save and go back to the browser to see the result. When I click on this area, the drop down is shown. When I click on any other area, the drop down will be hidden, either here or maybe here or anywhere. You can see that the drop down works fine. Let's open the console in order to check if we have any problems. I'm gonna go to the console. You can see that we don't have any problem. Now I want to implement that when the user clicks one of these options, this option gets the active class and this text is copied to here because I want the selected item to appear here. So let's implement that in JavaScript. I'll close this block because I don't want it anymore. more, the click event, also this one. Now I want to query the drop down items because I want to implement the click event on these drop down items. So I'll copy this class and I will query it here inside the load event. I will say const drop down items with the s because they are a lot of items. So here I will say document dot query selector all. I'll put the class here drop down item, and now I will iterate through these drop down items. So I'll say drop down items dot for each drop down item without the s, arrow the body or the callback function. I will make an inner iteration here, so I'll iterate one more time. I'll say drop down dot for each. I'll make it different by saying inner drop down item, arrow block of the function. Now I want to remove the active class from all of them, so I'll say inner drop down item dot class list dot remove the active class from all of them. This is the first thing. Let's see the result. Oh, you can see that we have a problem here, which is saying drop down item dot for each is not a function because I want to put the s here because I want this constant, not this one. Okay, let's save, go back to the browser. You can see here that when I open the drop down, oh, there is a problem. I think I should add the click event before performing this inner iteration. So I'll say drop down item dot add event listener click callback function, and I will move this block to there. And now let's save and go back to the browser. You can see that when I click on one of these drop down items, the active class is removed from this one. Now I want to add the active class to the one I clicked on, like Australia. I want the active class to be here. So the way to do that is here I wanna say that drop down item, this one, the one that the user clicked on, I want to add the active class. So class list dot add active. I want to add the active class. Save, go back to the browser. You can see that the active class is changing this way. Now I want the active item, the text of the active item, to be moved to this area. So first I want to query this input element, which is this one. I want to query this input element. I will take this class, go to JavaScript, and here I will define a constant and I will name it selected item input document dot query selector. I want this class, but inside this div element I want the input, not the selected item div element. I want the input that is inside. And now I will say that selected item input, the value of this input will be the inner HTML of the active drop down item. So drop down item dot inner HTML. Now if I go back to the browser to see the result, you can see that when I click on Saudi Arabia, this text is moved to here. When I click on Yemen, the text appears on this input element, as you can see. Now I want that when the user chooses one of these options, I want the drop down to be closed. The way to do that is to call this function close drop down. I'll call it here. So close drop down semicolon, save, go back to the browser. You can see that when the user clicks on Brazil, this Brazil is moved to here and the drop down closes. The last functionality I want to implement in this video is the search functionality, which is the most important one. When the user type B, I want just the items that starts with B to appear and the rest options I want them to disappear. So the first thing, I want to query this input element, the search input element, which is this one, this input element. So I will take this class, go to JavaScript, I will close this block, and here I will define a constant whose name is search input. Now I'll say document dot query selector. I want this class, but inside this div element I want the input. Now I will add an event to this input element, which is the key up. So I'll say search input dot add event listener. The event name is key up. Here is a callback function, arrow, lock. The first thing I want to do is to store this text that is inside this input element. I want to store it into a constant. So here I'll say const, I'll name it filter, and say that I want the text that is inside the search input, which is inside the value. So I'll say search input dot value. Now I want to iterate through these drop down items again. Here I will say drop down items dot for each drop down item without s, arrow function, and here I will check if the inner HTML of this drop down item equals to the filter. So here I will say if drop down item dot inner HTML dot starts with, this is the name of the function that checks if the text starts with the letters of a specified string. So I'll give it the string filter, and here for the drop down item that matches the search, I want it to be shown, otherwise I want it to be hidden. Let's go back to the CSS, and here I'll say if this li element has a class height, I'll paste it here, and I'll say if it has a hide class, I want it to have the property display none. Go back to JavaScript, and here I will say that the drop down item, I will say that I want the class height from the drop down item to be removed. So I'll say remove height, otherwise else I want this drop down item to have the class height dot add height. Let's go back to the browser to see the result. You can see here if I type uppercase B, you can see that the search result is filtered. But there is a problem here. What if the user types lowercase b? You can see that there are no matches. So I want to make the search case insensitive. I'll go back to Visual Studio Code, and here I'll say that I want this filter to be to lowercase. So here I'll say to maybe locale lowercase. I hope I spelled it right. Let's go back to the browser. Oh, you can see that it says it is not a function. I think this should be uppercase. Let's see. You can see now it is working. So I converted this text to lowercase. Now I want to also convert this text to lowercase. So I'll copy this function with the dot, Ctrl C, and here I'll click Ctrl V, save the work, and see the result. If the user type lowercase b, you can see that it shows this search result. When the user removes that letter, you can see that the search results are filtered. There are more things that I want to explain in this video, like when the user clicks on one of these options and then open the drop down again, I want to empty the string and show all the options, but I think the video is already long and I don't want to make it longer. If you want me to create a project with you using CSS, HTML, and JavaScript and explain the functionality like what I did in this video, please let me know by typing a comment in the comment section. So I think that's everything for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have an idea for the next video, please type it in the comment section, and please make sure that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.